Okay, now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about equipment, about the kind of stuff that you would need to have in order to start doing bat care or collecting bats, ambulance driving, that kind of thing. As you can imagine, with any hobby or pastime or voluntary role, you can do it in a very cheap and cheerful way, or you can get very in depth and buy very specialist equipment and housing and things. But you basically need three things in order to be able to start doing bat care or bat collecting. You need a pair of gloves, as we've talked about before. You need a labelled carrier, as we've talked about before, for transporting them. And the other thing that you'll need is either a pipette or a paintbrush, because by and large every single bat that you will come in contact with will need some water almost immediately. As we mentioned before, a lot of them have already been in a cardboard box in the finder's house for maybe a day, maybe 2, maybe 3 days. I've had bats that a lady has put outside in a plant pot, and it's ended up covered in snow and things like that. And so invariably the bat's going to have had some, if not injury, some exposure, and then certainly some dehydration. So you'll need something to give them some water with as your first bit of first aid. You can do that with a paintbrush. You can do it with a pipette. You can even do it with a teaspoon, but I find that quite fiddly and difficult, and not very good at that. Paintbrushes work incredibly well. One of the other things you're going to have to consider, aside from the container that you will be transporting the bat in, if you're going to be keeping the bat for more than, say, a day or two, you're going to have to start thinking about the quality and nature of the housing of the bat. If you're doing bat care rather than just collecting, this is certainly something that you're going to need to have ready before you take on any bats for more than a couple of nights. And again, there are a lot of options. Chris, I think you said you've had people who've kept them in like wicker baskets and
yes.
things like that. But in general, a lot of people use kind of plastic boxes that are meant for keeping reptiles in. We do have a few glass vivariums for sort of long-term bats, and you can, even if it's just for a few days, you can use something as simple as an ice cream tub. You basically want something that's bat-proof so they can't get out of it. So I went to pick up a bat earlier this month, and people had put it inside an Easter egg box, which is fine, apart from it didn't have the plastic insert, and so it was basically just a box. It was a dish with a great big Easter egg shaped hole in the top, which, as it was, the bat had died, unfortunately, but it certainly wouldn't have kept the bat contained. So that's one of the main things, is to keep it contained. You might want to consider whether your housing is portable, how easy it is to clean, the size of it, how much it costs, obviously, is going to be a consideration for you. And then long term, you want to think about things like the acoustics of a box. If you've got a bat that you are going to conceivably keep for more than 6 months, you in particular need to think about that the bat lives in a world of sight and sound, and it's incredibly sensitive to noise, and so sort of echolocating in a container with very reflective surfaces has got to be uncomfortable for the bat. So we do things like, as you'll see in this picture here, lining the inside of a glass vivarium with cork tiles, which also makes it nice and easy for the bat to crawl along the walls, but also improves the acoustics. So just wanted to show you a few of the different types of options that you've got, and the benefits of each. So the first that you can see, there's a little brown long-eared bat in an ice cream tub that's been lined with pieces of sort of fleecy material. The bat needs something to hang off, so you can use anything from sort of fleecy material to a tea towel to little fleecy puppy blankets and things like that. We've used all different kinds of things here and there. The advantages of the ice cream tub, provided that you've poked holes in the lid so that there's plenty of air in there, that the bat, it's completely bat proof, the bat's not going to escape from it, and it's obviously incredibly cheap. It's very easy to clean, and it's portable. So the disadvantages are that it's for long term it's quite small. for a bat. I think it's something that you could, if you had a bat in that you were going to have for a couple of days, then that would be a decent enough size. There are guidelines that on the different sizes and all of that kind of stuff as far as how big an enclosure needs to be is based on the size of the bat, so it's species specific. But in general, an ice cream tub will do for a day or two. One of the other things that we use quite a lot are pop-up butterfly cubes. The fantastic advantage of these is they're collapsible. So if, like me, you live in a flat, you haven't got an awful lot of space, then while you haven't got bats, you haven't got stacks of reptile vivariums sort of all around the room. So these are collapsible. Two of the sides are mesh, which the bats find very easy to climb on, and two of the sides are like a clear plastic, which means that you can observe the bat without getting in there and fiddling about with it too much. They're also portable, but they're not, because they don't weigh very much, they're not particularly sturdy, so I wouldn't use these really for transporting a bat in a car. And also they're not very dark for the bat, and so one of the things that you would do if you had something like this would be to either cover it with a tea towel so that it was darker and better for the bat, or to put it inside some other kind of container. One of the other things that I mentioned before are the little glass vivariums. So these are designed for reptiles and amphibians, but they're especially they're lined with cork tiles, as you can see here. They're fantastic for bats, especially long term, because they're heavy, they're very hard to clean, and they're not particularly portable. But they do suit the bat's needs very well, if not yours. So they are a bit of a pain when it comes to cleaning them. And then one of the other things that you can consider is something like a flexarium, or what people call a flexarium. The one in the picture is basically, it's a butterfly rearing tent, and this again is collapsible. So when I'm not using it, it gets collapsed and goes behind my bookshelf. Generally speaking, I find that bats like pipistrelles don't use it. You can put pipistrelles in this giant flexarium and they literally don't move from the little towel that they're hanging in. But species like brown long-eared bats do use it, and it's a fantastic way when you get a species like that to actually be able to see in the comfort of your living room how well it's flying. And so it's an excellent option if you get something like a brown long-eared bat. And I think that they can vary a lot. You get ones that have a solid frame that a lot of people use for sort of long-term housing for bats, and they can cost upwards of £100. But this collapsible one was £20. I'm just going to go over a little bit more of different types of equipment that you might find yourself using. The list is really as long as your arm, but this is just a few bits and pieces. The type of equipment that you use is going to vary depending on the size of the bats, the age of the bats, what you're feeding them, if you're feeding them, that kind of thing, and how long you're keeping the bats for. But feeding equipment, for example, you're going to need something to keep water and food in. If you are feeding mealworms, they can crawl out, basically. So you'll find what is the best thing for you as far as food dishes go. I tend to use the ones that are meant for reptiles. They cost a bit of money, but I find that they actually help keep the mealworms contained. Likewise, for the water dishes, you might want to go for basically the bat needs to be able to get to the water, and also the bat needs to be able to get to the water without knocking the water dish over. So the little reptile water dishes work really well. One of the other things that you will need is something like forceps or tweezers for feeding the bats. Pipettes, as I've discussed before, for feeding water, or if you're giving medicines to a bat, pipettes are kind of essential because you need to be able to measure specific amounts of medicine. Likewise for pups, if you're rearing pups, they need to have a specific amount of formula a specific amount of times a day, and so you need to be able to keep track of that, and so little pipettes are kind of essential. That's something that we give to our carers as well. We do find that when you are feeding a bat, you need to keep the bat contained. You need to be able to get to the bat and to be able to observe the bat. And so one of the things that we found very useful is a Ferrero Rocher box, upturned with a few holes drilled in the top for air. And they work as a really good way of containing the bat and allowing you to observe it eating without the bat being able to get away. Now, if you don't like Ferrero Rocher, Chris and I very selflessly are willing to eat the Ferrero Rocher out of the boxes before you use the box.
Or I know a man who can.
Absolutely. Another one of the things that, especially if you are more than likely this is going to be relating to pups, but I would imagine they might come in useful for convalescent bats as well. But sponges from which young bats will suck formula or water if they're not old enough to have their licking reflex working yet. Environmental concerns are things like temperature, and generally speaking, a relatively healthy adult bat will be comfortable in a room if you're comfortable. But young bats and convalescing bats and pregnant bats and basically any bat that's got any other specific health concerns will need a bit of extra warmth. Now, what we tend to use is things like heat mats, the kind that are designed for keeping reptiles warm. They don't overheat. They're quite good. We tend to advise people to have the heat mat, have the whatever the container is that the bat's in. It's only on the heat mat halfway, so the bat can move to the cool side and sort of regulate what temperature they want to be at themselves. For things like warming up a bat for release, we often do that on a hot water bottle. And when I say hot water bottle, a warm water bottle. Obviously, they're very sensitive to temperature, and you've got to be careful about scalding your bats. So a hot water bottle wrapped in a tea towel is a really good way to warm a bat up before release. One of the things that you will probably need if you are going to have baby bats in for any particular length of time is a thermometer, and that's because a baby bat needs to be at a certain temperature, and to make sure that they're comfortable, and because they're mammals and they're born with basically no fur, and they don't have the sort of the thick coat that an adult bat does. They lose heat very quickly, and so you need to keep an eye on the temperature in their container. For keeping their environment clean, you're going to need something to wipe out the inside of their container with, like paper towels, and we use Pet Safe spray, sort of like basically a disinfectant meant for cleaning out the cages of small mammals like small hamsters and things like that. You can get them at pet shops, and that works really well. For long-term bats, you might want to consider things, furnishings. I've mentioned pet fleeces, cork tiles. They like to sort of climb behind things and under things. So furnishings for reptiles work really well, like bark and logs. I've had a lot of success using the little wicker teepees that you can get for hamsters, and basically anything made for hamsters, bats will go inside. Things like that are also quite good for bats that won't hang up. So I've had a couple of bats that for one reason or another couldn't hang themselves up on the wall and wedge themselves into the fleece to keep themselves warm, and so they make these little hamster sort of sleeping bag things, and so I've used those for bats before. That's worked quite well. And things like safety pins and tea towels and soft toothbrushes for maybe getting if there's anything stuck on their fur, or soft paintbrushes for removing parasites and things like that. So there's lots, and as you carry on with your life as a bat carer, you'll sort of whittle away what works for you and what doesn't. So there's lots and lots of things that different carers use. You may find it useful to go onto the Facebook Bat Carers group, because there's you'll get a lot of suggestions and advice regarding furnishings and housing, a lot of which you will just need to sort of take on and consider, because you'll get differing opinions on what's good for bats and what's not good for bats, and you'll sort of have to find your own way, really. But that's a really good resource, and there's also a Yahoo group of bat carers, and they're also a fantastic resource of information and assistance with care and housing and things like that.
And what works in a British context may not work or be the same as for bat rescue, where they do a lot of it in Australia, but their bats are going to grow to 6-foot wingspans, so what they do don't fit for our bats.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they have they feed them with baby bottles and things like that, so everything's a lot more mini for us than for Aussie bats, but yeah, so you'll decide what works for you and what doesn't. We're just going to talk to you a little bit now about how our network works. This may or may not be the same as for your bat group if you're not in the Brumbats area, but this is just to give you an idea of sort of how things work. The sort of the road to becoming a bat carer start with volunteers usually dropping us an email or filling out one of the forms on our website expressing an interest in doing bat care. At which point I reply with an incredibly lengthy email detailing all of the things that basically the route that I'm about to sort of summarise here. They are given the GP's advice letter and doctor's declaration form, which is the piece of paper that you need to get signed by your GP as you have each of your rabies jabs. And the volunteer will then take it on themselves to arrange and undertake their vaccinations. And then they'll come along to either an introduction to bat care course, they'll watch what you're watching now, or they'll come along to other workshops and training that's available, and begin going along on bat care calls, first as an observer, and then when they're comfortable, taking a lead on bat calls with an experienced carer, shadowing them and giving them support, and then when they're ready, they begin taking the bat care calls and visits themselves, hopefully taking along a buddy or someone else with them, but generally speaking, you'll have support all the way through the process, and you're never sort of like left alone with a bat not knowing what to do. You have sort of support from us and sort of nationally from Bat Conservation Trust and from other bat carers all over the UK through social media networks and various other things. So there's plenty of support out there as you are becoming a bat carer. It's important to remember also that we're all at some stage in learning, that I'm not an expert and that Chris is not an expert, and that we're all learning together, and so we work to sort of share information and learn with each other as each different bat call comes in.
Having a vaccination is a big deal, particularly for some people. It's 3 lots of needles, so if this pathway's not quite right for you and you need to learn more before you commit and make the decision to have the vaccinations and get really involved, then the order can be slightly different.
Yeah, absolutely. You can come along and observe a few bat calls and then decide whether you want to go ahead with the vaccinations. We're flexible. One of the things that you will have access to as a Brumbats bat care trainee, and I have no doubt for other bat groups wherever you are in the country or in the world, you will have access to some training. But the available training that we provide is the sort of the follow-on to this course, which is Bat Care for Trainees. Bat Care for Trainees is a course that goes more in depth into the process of picking up a bat and assessment and providing first aid, and to learn how to pick up the bat and to go through that sort of assessment process and actually start doing some handling. As you move on, we have run in the past and are planning to run in the future bat handling workshops, which sort of just go through things like how to weigh a bat, how to look at the age of a bat, how to tell the gender of a bat. We also go a bit more into doing things like identifying different species, separating common and soprano pipistrelles, that kind of thing. And then also specialist workshops on how to feed pups. It's something that we like everyone to have done, even though you're not necessarily going to be taking on pups which need feeding every 2 hours. It might be that you'll be collecting a pup if you're going to be a bat collector. So you need to know how much is too much to feed them, and that just basically that kind of thing, really. the experiences that you'll be able to have. We like for people to have a positive experience first, and so we always try and make sure that someone gets to experience the joy of a bat release, because you have a lot of misery ahead of you, no doubt. And it's those bat releases and those moments that make all of the stress and the worry and the tears worth it. And so it's good for new bat carers to experience a bat release first. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, shadowing a carer on bat pickups, that's something that you can do at your own pace. You can start sort of learning how to deal with householders, and we'll cover in a bit that they're not always on board with bats, and a lot of them might be frightened or anxious and things like that. And so dealing with householders is something that you're going to need to learn how to do. And as we said with the training, just lots and lots of practice handling, identification and assessing bats, and you'll get more confident as you go on. It's a learning process, and it's a journey we're all on together.
Sometimes, because perhaps of the way that some of the licences and legislation has been phrased in the past, people who are thinking about getting licensed for bat work, both professionally and in a volunteer role, take that idea of handling as being a very important aspect of that, and think that this kind of experience is therefore necessary for those licensed roles, whereas actually it's not, but this can be very good experience for learning to do things like bat box checking and stuff in the future.
So I thought we'd just go through with you the process by which, the steps in between someone finding a bat and then you or someone else looking after the bat. Invariably, a finder will find the bat either in their garden, or they're somewhere in their house, or it's flying around stuck in a room, or the cat's brought it in, that kind of thing. And then they get in touch, hopefully, with Bat Conservation Trust. Now, this can happen either via the Batline phone number, through Bat Conservation Trust website. A lot of people end up phoning the RSPCA and things like that, and then it can take a while before they get on the right track and then end up phoning the Batline. And when the call comes through to Bat Conservation Trust, they have a sort of a team of volunteers that will then do a search for their closest bat carers that are registered with Bat Conservation Trust. For Brumbats, that is just a handful of us, and they are given a few numbers. And if they're, say, on the border, they might be given a couple of our numbers, and someone in Warwickshire or Worcestershire or Staffordshire, that kind of thing. And then it's up to the person who found the bat to contact the bat carers directly. Now, with Brumbats, those calls either come through usually to myself or to Chris, and we will either telephone, but usually text out to the couple of carers and trainees that are closest to where the bat has been found. And generally speaking, the first person to respond is given the finder's number, and then they contact them directly to arrange an appropriate time to go and to collect the bat. Hopefully, in the meantime, arranging someone to go with them, or if they're a carer, to take a trainee along, that kind of thing. So the collector will then pick up the bat, assess it, and give it first aid, and then either takes the bat into care themselves, because they're also a carer as well as a collector, or they deliver it to someone who's going to look after the bat more long term, at which point diagnosis and treatment and hopefully release takes place. Now, this is an ideal situation, and very often we do get calls in that are direct because, for example, someone might have found a bat last year, and they went through the BCT process, and they still have our phone number just in case they find more bats, and they have found more bats, and then they call the number, so they contact us directly. A lot of the time, they might, as I said, contact the RSPCA, and the RSPCA might not necessarily put them onto Bat Conservation Trust. They might put them onto a local vet, or someone has just taken the bat into a local vet, and depending on what the vet is like, they'll either treat the bat themselves, or they contact Bat Conservation Trust, or if they have our contact details, they'll contact us directly. So sometimes we get calls directly from vets. Now, occasionally you will find a vet that is very interested in bats and good at giving care and good at doing diagnosis, but you can't expect all vets to be completely au fait with the diagnosis and treatment of bats, and a lot of the time they will call us and have us take the bats off their hands for them. So that happens too. I mean, it just so happens that we do have a good relationship with a few veterinary practices across Birmingham and the Black Country, and I think that generally tends to be the way of things. Most bat groups have got a few vets that they work with that will do things like perform euthanasia if you feel that a bat is in distress, that there's no hope for it to get better and be released, and you think it's in a lot of pain, and you think that euthanasia is the best option. Then there are some vets that will do that, and generally speaking, vets have an obligation. Am I correct that they will treat wildlife and they won't charge you anything?
Another thing is that there are access to the bat care guidelines on the Bat Conservation Trust website that you can refer the vets to, so that they can get more information and things in there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few papers that have been written and guideline things that have been written with vets in mind, and those are the kind of things that you can have copies of, and then if you have an interaction with a vet and you think that they would benefit from it, then you can provide them to them. As I've mentioned previously, there's lots of support and resources available to you as a bat carer or a trainee bat carer. Our bat carers at Brumbats have access to a password-protected website that includes a library of all different kinds of leaflets. As you can see on the slide here, the links to the Doctor's Declaration Form of Vaccination Information Letter, information on things like white nose syndrome, and also to the bat care guidelines. There's loads of stuff on the BCT website as well that's available for you. But one of the things that we do is we provide all of our bat carers and trainees with each other's contact details. Now, as I said, this is password protected. We change the password every season, and once you've had your vaccinations and attended a training course and you're ready to sort of take the plunge into bat care, then you'll be listed on here as a trainee, and you won't necessarily be moved up to the carer section unless you absolutely want to. Also listed is the area that you're happy to cover, that kind of thing, so people know not to phone you if you're in Walsall and they need help in Solihull, kind of thing. So, and there's also, as we mentioned before, health and safety, lone working stuff, lots of links to places like the Susie Lamplugh Trust and things that we've mentioned earlier on. And also there's a training tab where you can see the list of all the upcoming training courses, and you can book right then and there onto the web, on the page, onto those training courses. There's a few other things like the bat registers, which Chris is going to talk about in a minute. But yeah, we hope that this is a really good resource for you. It's always a work in progress. So if it's once you have access to it, if you have any ideas or suggestions for additions to the pages, then we're happy to take that on.
So now we're on to the actual job at the basic, although not unimportant level of bat care, the actual collecting, fetching them, starting the process, ambulance driving kind of role. So whatever you're doing, at some point you're probably going to pick up a bat for us to look after or for you to look after. So just to go back a little bit, the most important things are your safety. Let's not worry about the bats at all. The householder's safety, and that includes their pets and their children. So it's very important to get any kind of feel of if anybody's been bitten, those kind of things. And then finally, the bat's safety and welfare, if everybody else has been taken care of. So if you've decided to do it, go and get that bat, you think it's safe enough, you've got time, you've got petrol, all of those kind of things, then you're going to go and fetch that bat. Turn up on somebody's doorstep professionally and courteously, meet them and find out the history of the situation from them. And this is just listening, just to say, tell me about it. And all of this stuff is good practice for if you go on to other roles in bat work, particularly the bat roost visitor role, because that's all about getting the version from the person. So, and if the person feels listened to, then they'll feel more warmly towards you, and hopefully also warmly towards the bats. Get written down any information. There's a form for that. That will come on the screen. And then depending on how you feel about the environment that you're in and how you're presenting the bat to the person who's found it, then you might make an initial assessment of the bat in the person's house. If they want to know more about it, if they're interested, if you feel safe, all of those kind of things, and explaining to them what you're going to do next, depending on the state of the bat. Or if you're really not happy about the situation, or it's late and they want rid of you, then just sort of say, have a quick look at it, say, I don't know, I think it's injured, I'll let you know, those kind of things, and get out of there. You'll have to decide what you're going to do in that situation. But make sure that you tell the person what's going to happen next. So you don't know, you'll definitely let them know. You think it's likely euthanasia, but you'll let them know. You're really hopeful about the bat's situation, and it's likely that with a bit of care, the bat will be back to health, and you'll be bringing it back to let it go in or their garden or near their garden quite soon, and then keep them up to date. And we'll talk a bit more about ways of doing that. Good record keeping is really important, both for sake of the bat, but also from a legal point of view, particularly if you're going to have the bat for a long time. And also records are important to the conservation side of things, because if we know where bats are and where roosts are, then we can work on a more landscape scale to protect the bats and the places that they live. So getting the facts, just to expand a bit on the sort of information that you're going to need and would be useful, and is going to go on the form or on your notes. We need to know how long the bat's been injured or grounded. Unfortunately, the longer that the bat's been in trouble, the less likely that there's going to be a good outcome. But also you're going to need to know how urgent it is that you give the bat a drink. It's pretty well always urgent, but do you need to know there and then? Do you need to do that there and then, or can you go around the corner in the car and do it carrying your little bottle of water with you if need be? Or are you going to do it when you get home? Those kind of things. We also need to know if there's the possibility of a bat roost in the property or very nearby, and if that's an issue in any way for the people living there, particularly if they might also have impending building work or they're very upset about it. The whole roost visiting role is another brand of bat work, and that's also something that needs to be referred to the Bat Conservation Trust, who, for roosts in houses, represent Natural England and the processes around that. We need to know if anybody's been hurt by the bat, so scratches or bites with humans or with pets. Obviously from point of view of the European bat lyssavirus aspect, but also because if the bat is then euthanased or dies, there's different things that we might decide to do with the body of the bat, depending on the process that has happened to it before. We want the person who's handing the bat over to you to be given a chance to tell their story, particularly if they're a bit upset about it, because if you really listen, then they'll really calm down. But also you may pick up little extra bits of information that they don't know that they need to tell you, and that you can explore a bit with some more questions, particularly the nature of where the bat might have come from, if there's a roost, or if there's a roost not in their house then nearby. And if they've got a regular history of their cat or somebody else's cat having bats, then there may be things that we can follow up with them to do something about that. And we need to know also what information we might need to give to the finder or householder with regard to maybe sending them in the post more leaflets, or giving them contact details to arrange a roost visit in the future if it's not needed at the moment, or where you can direct them to online to find more information if they're really interested, or they're a teacher and they suddenly want to do something about all this information for their class. So we've talked quite a bit about what you would do during the process of collecting the bat from a householder, but we also need to be clear about what isn't your job. Morgan explained with the flowchart how it was that news of a bat might come to you, and what will hopefully have happened if the person has been in touch with Batline at the Bat Conservation Trust is that they will have talked to a person on Batline, either an out-of-hours volunteer or somebody employed by Batline in office hours, and had quite a informing conversation about what to do with the bat, what's going to happen next. And that would include things like them getting the bat into a box safely, a box with a lid, possibly with a book on the top so the bat can't push its way out if it's a shoe box or something like that. Possibly some water in a small dish like a milk bottle top for the bat. And we don't want you to be trying to get a bat off the top of a curtain or those kind of things, because that means working at height. We don't want you standing on a chair and falling off and hurting yourself. There are ways of using hand nets, static hand nets, so not sweeping about through the air but holding it still over a bat to get a bat from a location like the top of a curtain. But that's actually a licensable activity and isn't something that we would want somebody in a volunteer role as a bat carer and collector to be doing, unless they were also licensed under the Wildlife and Countryside Act to do static hand netting. The other side of things is that although you might and hopefully will understand something about the legal aspects around bat disturbance and bat roosts, that you wouldn't be advising on those things, but would be suggesting that if somebody had issues around that they get in touch with Batline directly, or that we would be working towards arranging a subsequent roost visit. You'll be leaving them leaflets and information, hopefully, but not actually suggesting any way forward, because that could put you in a slightly difficult legal situation, and also the householder. When you turn up, you probably will have spoken to the person on the phone who you're going to meet and gauge some kind of idea about what their feelings about the bat is, but just to be prepared for people's reactions to bats. If you've got this far into this online training, then we're assuming that you like them, but not everybody feels the same. People can feel negatively in terms of high anxiety, be very fearful to the point of phobia, hate the bat for reasons that perhaps they can't even express, certainly not necessarily wanting to go anywhere near it. All these things are often much more related to other stuff about them that you won't know about. Quite a lot of people have phobias of flying flappy things. Some people have watched way too many movies that's good for them. All sorts of other things that might be going on that you won't necessarily know. Unfortunately, you're just as likely to get somebody with their own mental health needs as somebody who is well, so you won't know necessarily what's going on. Other people will be very positive and will be very anthropomorphizing about the bat and thinking that it's very cute, possibly asking if they can keep it, those kind of things. That's lovely and positive, but also needs managing. They're going to be very worried about what you're going to do for the bat and hoping maybe that you can keep it alive at any cost. So that might need a bit of managing. People are often amazingly kind, particularly if you spend ages in their house trying to find out where the bat's got to, as I did a couple of years ago. We eventually found it hanging on a plug in a socket behind a exercise machine. So there we go. They're often very grateful because they're not going to want to go to bed in that room until the bat's been found, and press money on you. That's fine. Please declare it to the Bat Group treasurer, and then we'll work out what we're going to do with the money from there on in. It might be that you spend it on equipment or gloves or something, or it might be that you give it to the bat group directly. People also want advice on things like where they might put a box in the garden in the hope that bats might come to live in there as well. And that's something that if they want to chat about it and it's not the middle of the night, you're at liberty to do. Unfortunately, a significant number of bats that we need to collect have been catted, cat damaged, cat caught, often by the cat or cats living in that house, but sometimes by next door's cat. Sometimes people are very realistic about the natural instincts of their pet and know that cats catch things even when they spend a lot of time also asleep. Some people believe that their cats are genuinely incapable of anything other than sleeping and eating and find it very difficult to believe that their cat would have caught something. It's quite possible that cats may well have done so even if they do look very innocent, and that can be a difficult conversation when somebody doesn't believe that their cat might have done terrible damage, as you can see to the wing of this bat in this picture. Morgan, is this bat alive or dead?
No, this bat is dead.
Not surprised. There's not a lot left of it, is there?
No, it came in completely lacerated, and as you can see, there's the broken digits as well. So, I mean, the wing membrane would probably have healed in time, but whether it would have been able to fly well enough to go back into the wild is negligible.
Yeah.
They also get quite bad puncture wounds, and even if they're doing well with their other injuries and they don't look too bad, they tend to, within a few days, die from infection.
Because the body wall's punctured and the infection of the cat's
absolutely.
teeth and claws has got in there, and then the bat's massively infected, septicemia, and dies. Not a nice way to go.
I mean, if the bat is found soon enough and brought in and we can get antibiotics into it really quickly, then it stands a good chance of surviving, and provided there are no major bone breakages, then it has a chance of being re-released. But by and large, there is a bit of a delay sort of between the cat actually catching the bat, then the person finding it, and then maybe a day or two later them finally getting in touch with BCT and getting a bat carer out, by which point infection's already set in.
You can't usually get them back from the edge then with oral antibiotics.
No.
So after that rather depressing visit to cat damage, positive things are it's also great if you can engage the person who's found the bat by suggesting to them that they give the bat a nickname. This is a personal thing. Morgan is a great proponent of this because of her social networking approach to things.
Yeah, I am now. I didn't used to be. I think that it's that whole anthropomorphizing thing and can be a negative thing, but I think that the benefits people get from being able to follow their bat's progress does, and also, it helps us to keep track of which bat is which. It does help rather than calling it, bat 7.
Yes, there's also a slight danger that people will come up with yet another very witty Batman-themed name that
Bruce.
You've heard umpty times before and you have to smile. Yeah. So, hey, I think the street naming thing is probably a reasonable compromise. It also, if you've got more than one in to look after them, it can make things a little bit easier maybe if you're labelling the boxes like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it does help to sort of have in your mind a name that's a geographical name. Like it says on this slide, we had a bat from Addison Street, so we called her Addison, and that helps me to keep track of which bat. We know when you've got 10, 15 bats in, it helps you keep track of where they need to be released when they're ready to go. We could all just call them after postcodes.
It might be help with data crunching at the end of the year, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Definitely.
Finally, it's great if you can leave the householder with leaflets that you think they might find useful. Living with bats, if we think we're going to have to follow up all this around a roost, bats and the law again, if there's a roost issue, and the avoiding a catastrophe is a pun and is about managing your cat to protect the bats in your area. Having done all of that, done great PR for the bats, been safe, take the bat in the labelled box in your transport of choice, taking it either to your house or to somebody who's going to care for it longer term than you. In that situation, the bat probably needs to be on the journey in its box, warm, unless it's very injured, in which case if it's already cool you might keep it cool so that it doesn't go with further pain and distress because it's warming up and therefore moving around more. Certainly quiet, so not right next to the speaker on the floor in the car. Dark. I often wrap the box in the picnic blanket and put it in the boot, wedged in so it's not going to roll around. As short as possible and as gentle as possible, so again, not rolling around in the boot. And the piece of paper with the information gathered so far stays with the bat when you hand it over to the person that you're taking it to, or when you put it onto the shelf in your house. So there may be times when you definitely feel that you need some backup. That would be if it's quite clear that there's a bat roost in the property that you visited or nearby, and there's going to be further work needed around that to advise and support the people involved, either because they're very distressed or perhaps because there's some work proposed to that property, like roofing, building work, new windows, that kind of stuff. In that situation, gather some details in terms of who it is and where it is, and are they happy to be contacted, and then that needs to be fed back to Batline, holding the contract for Natural England around roost visits. But also it's fine to call another bat carer for help if you're not sure what to do next. I don't mind being called late at night. I might take a while to wake up, but that's okay. You've phoned me when I've been at a dinner party, haven't you, Morgan?
Yep.
So that stuff happens, doesn't it?
Yep.
It's okay to do. So, following your collection, you should keep the person who found the bat updated on how their bat's doing. It's likely that you're going to be returning a rehabilitated bat to the same place. So, although it is possible to kind of do it in the area of a house, it's much better to do it in the back garden or in somewhere slightly quieter than the street, outside where the bat's been found, because it's got a better chance of getting into habitat that it needs quickly. Mature gardens behind a house would be much better than the street in front of a house, so you're probably going to need the cooperation of the person that found it, and hopefully they're very keen to be involved as well, and it is a lovely thing to see.
And in failing that, I tend to have a look on Google Maps or Google Earth and have a look for the nearest green bit to where the bat was found, because a lot of times if the finder might not want to be involved, they just, if they are one of those really fearful people. So the nearest park or garden or even nature
Canal
area,
edge
canal, that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Do you want to say something about social media?
Yes, that basically there's quite a few of Brumbats carers on Twitter and on Facebook, and we do try to post how our bats are doing. And since we had a bit of feedback about how people would like to be able to follow their bat if they're not on social media, we now have our hashtag stream appears on the Brumbats website. So if you go to brumbats.org.uk and look on the right hand side, you will see the updates that all of our bat carers who are on Twitter post about their bats. So it's a place where you can direct the householders to go to keep up to date with how their bat is doing. Having said that, most of the time we end up phoning the finders or texting them updates as well. So
sometimes I write them letters with a stamp.
That's very old school. Of course, a successful release isn't the only possible outcome for a bat. the potential outcomes are that the bat is already dead when you pick it up or you go to collect it, that the bat will die in captivity due to its injuries or for some other reason. Sometimes bats can die and you won't know what internal injuries they have, and they seemingly die without explanation. Or the outcomes can be that they are successfully released on site, or that they are soft released, or that they this hasn't happened yet, that they become a permanent education bat. It's not an aspiration of ours to have a bat in permanent captivity. We do try to release them and consider what their quality of life would be if they weren't released. And that kind of decision making is the real sort of meat and bones of actual bat care, because until you get into it and you're deciding what the prospects are for each bat, it seems that bat care is all about feeding and assessing and giving medication and keeping the temperature right, all of which are vital. But the decision making as far as things like euthanasia go can be a really, really big part of it. However, it's important to remember that all of these outcomes are successful outcomes, even if the bat dies, because hopefully you will have had a positive contact with someone, done some PR work for bats and for bat conservation, and that you've learned something. So every time that a bat dies in captivity, every time a bat has to be euthanized, that you've had the opportunity to improve your handling skills, improve your assessment skills and your identification skills, and that every bat that you look after informs the next bat that comes into your care. And so we like to think that in the cases even where the bats have died or have to be euthanized, that they are all positive outcomes.
Bats that are euthanized also get sent away for research projects.
Absolutely, yeah. So thank you very much for sticking with us and making it through to the end of this very long online Introduction to Bat Care course. Our contact details are on the screen here. If you'd like to email either of us, please feel free to do so. If you have any questions about bat care or about volunteering for Brumbats, if you think that it would be beneficial to have an online chat with us, that's the kind of thing that we can arrange. And if we get enough demand for that, then that's something that we can sort out. So please keep an eye on our website and our blog. That's www.brumbats.org.uk. And you can find Brumbats on Twitter @Brumbats, and follow #BrumbatsCare to see the updates of all of our bats, or just keep an eye on the homepage of our website.